But let's talk about, is privacy is not safe? Platypuses. We're going to tell you all about them today. They are super weird. So a platypus, or a duck-billed platypus, is a semi-aquatic egg-laying mammal that only lives in eastern Australia and Tasmania. So the common name platypus means flatfoot, which I think is really funny because of all the things, when you look at a platypus, the thing that sticks out is their flat feet. No, that is silliness. There's no universally agreed upon term for a plural of platypus. Some people call them platypi. There's platypuses, simply platypus. So there's whatever you say, whenever you see a whole, if you're lucky enough to see a lot of platypus, pusses, platypus, you can say whatever you want. You're just like, whoa, there's a whole bunch of them there, and I'm having the best day of my life seeing them. Early British settlers to Australia had no idea what to call them. They were like, is that a water mole? Is it just a duckbill? Should I call it a duck mole? But it kind of like agreed that it's like a duck-billed platypus. So they have a duckbill, flatfoot animal. It together is with 4 species of echidna, which is another very interesting, weird animal of Australia. Maybe next season in Animal Chat Time, we'll talk about it. They are egg-laying mammals. What? We're going to talk a whole bunch about what that means and why they developed the egg-laying everything in there. They're also one of the few species that is a venomous mammal, because the male platypus has a spur on the back of his hind foot that delivers venom if he hits someone with the spur, which we'll talk a little bit about. No one has ever been killed by a platypus before, but apparently it causes excruciating pain. The venom that they have is not just like, ooh, that kind of hurts. It is a like super de-duper painful thing. So it is a duck-billed, beaver-tailed, otter-footed mammal that when European naturalists went to Australia, when they first encountered it, they brought a platypus back to show scientists and just like everyone back in England. And the people that they brought it back to actually looked at the platypus for like stitches, because they were pretty sure it was a fake animal that they just stitched together. Like, this thing absolutely is not real. But it is real. That's why we're talking about it. So like all mammals, they produce milk for their young, but they have a big duckbill platypus. So this was something that I was like, how do they drink the milk from their moms? Well, it's kind of cool. It's kind of gross. It's kind of amazing. So platypuses don't have any teats or nipples. What they do is the milk just oozes out of their ducts in their skin. So they just sweat milk. And then the milk collects in grooves in their skin and in the tufts of fur, and so their babies come over and they drink the milk off of the fur. Or if they're leaning back and they have like a groove in their skin, the young babies will drink it up like they're drinking, from like a cupped hand. If you like put your hand in like a river or water source or things like that, that's how they drink their milk. So it's a little bit different than we see from like cows with udders, or like a dog or a cat that has teats. They just sweat the milk and their babies just lap it up, which I think is lovely, but a little bit different than what we've seen with any other mammal. Like I said, male platypuses have a 1/2-inch spur. So it's sort of like They have an extra thumb on the back of their back foot, and it is connected to kind of like a modified sweat gland, and that's what creates the venom. Again, no one has ever been killed by the venom of a platypus, but they are able to kill dogs or coyotes, things that are trying to eat them. So not only do they sometimes use it against, a male will use it against another male during mating season and say, get out of here, this is where I live. Sometimes if a predator is trying to attack them, they'll use their spur and get them with venom. Such a cute little animal, very dangerous. So their body is broad and flat. We kind of all know what platypuses look like, sort of like a mole, sort of like a beaver. Now, what we don't know what they look like is, well, maybe we do. Wow, look at that drawing. Cool. That looks excellent. Now, something that is so amazing is platypuses are dark brown, right? Not all the time. They have bioluminescent fur, biophosphorescent fur. What happens is little bacteria goes into their fur, and under a black light, they actually blow, they don't blow at all. They glow blue-green, which is so interesting, right? They look like regular animals swimming along. But if you see them under a black light, if you see UV, like perhaps a bird would, then they actually glow because all of the living organisms that are on their skin are fluorescent, and they absorb the energy from the sun, and then at night they glow, which is pretty neat. So they're a blue-green, duck-billed, flat-footed, beaver-tailed mammal that lays eggs. You following me? I'm not following me. Their fur is waterproof because they spend so much time in the water, they don't want to get cold all the time. And platypuses use their tails as like a fat reserve, which is kind of cool. So their tails are not flat like a beaver, they're fat like a platypus. They have webbing on their feet, on the front and back feet, so they are very, very good at swimming. But interestingly, they don't have feet that connect from their tummies down like most mammals. Their feet go outward a little bit like a crocodile because they spend so much time swimming and living in the riparian area, which is areas that are close to water but not quite water. So it doesn't have to be a swamp, but it is part of like a river system and a watershed. They spend so much time there, they like walk a little bit like a crocodilian. They do have elongated snout, as we know, in the bill, and their nostrils are just on the top of their bills. They do have ears. They don't really use them so often, but I will tell you why. Sometimes they do have a little low growl, and there are some vocalizations that they do, but like not really a lot. So their weight actually varies quite considerably from 0.7 to 2.4 kilograms, which is about 1 pound to about 5 pounds. So like quite big and small. The males are larger than females, and males are about 50 centimeters or 20 inches in total length. So they're longer than a ruler, and they can weigh like 5 pounds or 2.5 kilograms. So they do have this this reptilian gait that they like walk side to side rather than like we'd see like a dog or a cat or a giraffe or things like that. And because they have such floppily webbed feet, they do have to walk on their knuckles when they're walking. So they're much happier to be in water. So here's where we get super interesting if you weren't interested before. So remember last week we talked about hammerhead sharks, and we said that hammerhead sharks have all these pores in their noses that they can feel electromagnetic pulses from different animals, and that's how they hunt. Well, this is how platypuses hunt as well, which made my brain kind of explode. I needed to put the computer down and take a walk because what in the world? So interesting. So their duck bills actually have all these very sensitive pores in them. and they are able to hunt this way. So instead of hunting with smell or with sight or things like that, what platypuses do is when they dive down to hunt for their food is they close their eyes, they close their ears a little bit, they don't pay attention, and they wiggle their bill back and forth in the muck. And they use their bill to kind of go in the muck, and then they go, oh, and they can sense the electromagnetic presence of animals. So remember, electricity is anytime you move a muscle, there's an electrical pulse. So if you are a crayfish or a crab or something that would, or a worm that would be eaten by a duck-billed platypus, if you try to move away, they are going to sense the electricity that your body's using to move those muscles. If you stay totally still, your heart is still a muscle and it's still creating electrical pulses. And so they are able to, with their beak going around in the mud, they're able to sense the electro pulses from your heart, from your muscles, which is so interesting and so weird and not what I thought they did at all. As it turns out, they are super good hunters. I just thought that they were very cute. But you know, they live on Earth, they evolved in really interesting ways, and they are actually kind of like the perfect hunter for where they live, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. Because you think something just looks goofy. It doesn't look goofy. It is perfect for where it needs to live. So they are semi-aquatic. They live in small streams and rivers. So no salt water, no bracken, nothing that could have salt in it, just like freshwater streams, rivers, all over the cold highlands of Tasmania, the Australian Alps, but also tropical rainforests in Queensland. So, oh my gosh, Field, that is such a good platypus. Looks so good. And so you can see its beak. That beak is what it uses to sense the electromagnetic waves of these animals that it's hunting. Isn't that so neat? You think it's just like a regular duck beak. Nope, it's sensing things, which is pretty cool. So platypuses are actually nocturnal. Oh, Field and Birch, excellent job. That looks so good. Yeah, so yeah, Birch, I saw that you colored the duckbill really, really well. And that is actually the color of their bills, which is pretty neat, right? And that is, yeah, so they would put that in the muck and it would no longer be that color because it's a little bit mucky. And that's what they swirl around when they're looking for delicious things. Now, they are predated by crocodiles. They are sharing this land and this water, and so crocodiles do eat them. But because, again, they're able to sense the electro pulses from other animals, not only do they know how to hunt, but they know if something is creeping up behind them. They're like, oh, I can feel a heartbeat. I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you. They are nocturnal, and this is probably because they don't need their eyes to see anything. They just spend a lot of time schnoofling around with their duckbills. They hang out, they do live in nesting burrows. And so a little bit like beavers, like voles, moles, things like that. When they're hunting, they're hunting. When they're not hunting, they're having a little bit of a nap in a burrow that they made. They can dive for around 30 seconds. So not a huge amount of time for something so aquatic, but they are just in rivers. They don't really spend time in lakes or things like that. So they can dive down for about 30 seconds, and then it takes them about like 10 or 20 seconds to catch their breath again before they dive down again, which is pretty neat. Sort of like beavers, if you know about beavers, their burrows, some of the burrow is on top of the water and some is under the water. So they're able, they breathe air, so they want to be sleeping where it's like nice and dry and cool. But then to get out of the burrow again, they go through the water to go hunting and to hang out. The average platypus sleeps for about 14 hours a day. So that's very relevant to my interests. I do love that fact. This is probably because they do eat a lot of crustaceans. So they eat shrimp, like freshwater shrimp and crabs and things like that, because they have such high calories. If they just have a little bit of crustaceans, then they have enough food in their tummy and they can go to sleep. So I love this idea. I love having a lot of high calorie food and then taking a nap. They are carnivores, and so they eat worms and larvae, freshwater shrimp, freshwater crayfish, anything that, again, they can dig around in the muck and they're able to have anything that's in there. Oh my gosh, Daniel, you look like a duckbill platypus. Look at that beak you have. Something that I think is really neat is, so last week, remember when I said the only thing I know about platypuses is what platypus babies are called. So there's two names. I only knew one. So the one that I learned was they're called platypups. So cute. And the other one that I learned is, well, not that I learned, that I knew, is babies are called puggles. So you can either call a baby platypus a platypup or a puggle, and you would be correct in both ways, which I think is adorable. So the eggs stay in their mom for about 28 days, and then they have 10 days on the outside that mom kind of like makes sure they're warm, and then they can get out of the eggs. When they hatch out of the eggs, though, they're the size of a jelly bean. Y'all, they're so little. So like, think about this like little flat-footed, duck-billed, beaver-tailed cuteness, but a little tiny jelly bean. Of course they're called puggles. How could you call it anything else? It's a puggle. I'm done. It's great. Now, so a lot of scientists were like, how on earth is this mammal laying eggs? What in the world? Why would it do that? And it's actually really interesting. Oh, Field, that looks so great. Now, the reason they think, we don't actually know, we can't ask them, but we think because they spend so much time in and out of the water, having a live baby in the water at that time would be kind of dangerous for the baby. And so through evolution and through all this time, the best thing for like a mom to do would be to evolutionarily make sure that she lays eggs. Now, if she was a marsupial, this would be the other problem, right? Like if she was like a kangaroo that had a pouch, like a lot of animals in Australia, this makes sense if you were never in the water. But because they spend so much time in the water, if you have a little baby in your pouch, it doesn't know to hold its breath. It's just a little baby. So it evolved to not be a marsupial that's in a pouch, incubating, figuring out how to be a grown-up platypus. They evolutionarily, the best thing to do was to lay an egg, have that egg be safe in water, out water, in the muck, all these other things, in a burrow. In a burrow, it's going to stay nice and warm as well when the mom is out hunting. And then it will hatch and then be its own little puggle. And so I think that's really cool, right? Like we look at this animal, and when they were first discovered by Europeans, we were like, this animal is not real, you made it up. But this animal is so perfectly evolved for where it is. It doesn't need to, or it does need to have milk, but it doesn't need to have udders or teats or things like that. It uses its beak to sense electropulses to go hunting. It stores fat in its tail. It has eggs, not a pouch. Like everything about this makes it like one of the most perfect evolved animals in the world, which I think is so neat. So males don't take part in raising the young. The moms do all of that. She makes this burrow, and then she makes like a birthing burrow, and she puts dead and folded wet leaves. She like takes other reeds and bedding material, and she makes it really nice and poofy for the eggs and then puggles when they're born. And she drags this material into the burrow with her tail. So she curls her tail around and she drags all the stuff in to make a little nursery for her babies, which I just think is so lovely and so nice. Some of the burrows can be up to 20 meters long, which is about 65 feet. So there's like a lot going on. When the mom knows she's going to lay her eggs, she'll plug up the holes, and she'll also plug up different parts of the burrow. And this is to make sure that it doesn't get too wet, but also make sure that predators don't get in there. And so if there's just a bunch of things blocking the way, sort of like Helm's Deep, if you're old enough for that, then things are, they're not going to get too wet, they're not going to get too cold, and they're not going to be predated by these crocodiles and things like that. So again, like all of these lovely evolutionary things have happened to make sure that platypuses have been on this earth for a long time, and they're going to be a longer time because they know how to survive. Let's look at some pictures of platypuses, shall we? My transition is never that quick. Blanc. So, animal chat time with platypuses, platypups. So here is a lovely up-close picture. You can see that their fur is waterproof. So even though they spend lots of time in the water, they're not getting really cold. You can see where they breathe out of their duck bills. You can see their ears and their little eyes. And so yeah, if we look at the bill, remember that bill is connected to a whole bunch of parts in their brain because they're using that bill to sense if there are electrical pulses all the time. So it is like, it's not just a bill, it is a lot happening with this little guy. This is such a beautiful representation to show the skeleton of a platypus. You can see that this is a male platypus because the back feet, you can see the spur where the venom would come out. Quite a big spur compared to the rest of the animal. And you're also able to see just like how big their jaws are. You can see the front part of their bill is most of it's soft tissue, and most of it is there to do a lot of sensing when they're in the water. So again, it's not just a bill, it is a bill that is here to do a lot of work. They have quite big brains, and then you can see their vertebrae in their neck is also very tall, and they're specifically to make sure that they're safe if anything tries to like chomp their neck. They're very robust, which is pretty cool. Here's one on land. You can see its front foot. They're walking on their knuckles because it would just like, if you've ever walked in like flippers, if you go snorkeling, it's very difficult to like navigate. So they like scrunch up their front feet and knuckle walk. And you can just see like how proportion wise they look. They have, you know, that fat tail, a good sized head, and then yeah, really, really flat feet. Here's one that is swimming, has just found a little worm, and you can see its eyes are closed. It does not use its eyes to hunt at all. It just depends on its duck bill. And you can see just like how sleek they are and how it does have a little fatty tail for energy reserves, but the rest of them are just like looking at the feet made to get in the water and be really fast when they are swimming. This one is just coming up for sun, and I just loved the this little representation of a duckbill platypus, because again, if we were just to look at it, we'd be like, what a silly creature. It will probably not be an amazing hunter and live on Earth for millions of years. As it turns out, we would be wrong. The silly creature is the best. So that is duckbill platypus. Does anyone have any questions about these funny little guys? Daniel, your hand is very much up. Oh, we have lots of questions.
I was wondering what their predators are.
Ooh, yes, that is a good question. So crocodiles are their major predator, but also like anything that lives in rivers. So there's crocodiles and there are snakes, and also things like coyotes that were introduced into the area, and dogs. And so there are natural predators and there's predators in Australia that shouldn't be there. Cats as well can also be predators if they're quite big, but it's mainly crocodiles. It's things that they're sharing the water with.
So my question was, do baby and platypuses have that sense on their bill? Like
Yeah.
They do? Oh,
They
cool.
do, yeah. So interestingly, baby platypuses have an egg tooth when they're first born, so they can get out of the eggs, and then after that tooth falls off, and in the process, they always are able to sense. They don't learn how to hunt from their moms, and so that means from the moment they're born, they're able to sense the electromagnetic waves and hunt. So as soon as they're born, they're little jelly beans and they're able to be like, whoa, that's a big thing, I need to get away from it. Or that is a little thing, I'm going to eat it. That's a good question.
A worm would be probably pretty big for a tiny little jelly bean platypus.
Yeah, well, right, they're so little. You'd have to think about like, what do they need to eat when they're small? And that is why, you know, they feed off of their mom's milk for a while, but because they are carnivores, they feed off their mom's milk. They like lap it up from her fur or from like grooves in her skin. But then also it just kicks in their animal sense that they feel something in their beak and they're like, this seems like it would be delicious. And so they try to hunt it. Probably the first couple times they don't get a worm, but eventually they do. And they're like, this is delicious. And now I know what the sense is, kind of like a spidey sense.
Do they eat worms? I mean, like not worms, but minnows. Do they eat minnows?
Well, yeah, they could. If the minnow was small enough, they could. And I guess like minnows are quite small. But they do have like mainly worms and small crayfish. So if it was like a minnow fry, like a baby, they would eat that for sure. Because it does have to be small enough for them to like yum, 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 yum. But yeah, anything small made of meat in the river, they're eating it.
Yes, my question is, how do the eggs get out of their bodies?
How do the mummies have the eggs? Well, this is actually a very interesting question. They're sort of like turtles and like birds. So they have something called a cloaca. So they have like quite a big hole. And so the mummies, now remember that they are about the size of a ruler and a half, like that's the size of a platypus. And then their eggs are only big enough to house something the size of a jelly bean. So it's not like it is this huge egg that has to come out of it. It's kind of small, probably doesn't feel great. Sorry to all the platypus moms out there, but they do just push it out. So they like, you know, just like a chicken or a turtle or some snakes, they're able to just push a little jelly bean egg out and they know that it's their babies. And so they're able to sit on them, keep them warm. Oh, sorry?
How did the platypuses evolve?
How did they evolve? Well, yeah, so platypuses had like 5 or 6 different cousins in the evolutionary tree. And what happens in evolution is every time an animal is like very good, it like is able to eat a lot of like very good food, is able to be really comfortable, then it has a lot of babies. And so for a while, platypuses were only on land, and then they would go into water to do a little bit of hunting. But then the platypuses that had webbed feet did really, really well. So the platypus looked like kind of like a beaver. We'll say a rat. And then it evolved to kind of look more like a beaver, and then its tail got bigger, and then its beak got bigger, and then it didn't use its eyes. And so everything started kind of like how we would see a rat or a vole, and then it would get more and more specialized. And now it is what we see a platypus is now.
How many eggs can a platypus lay at one time?
Oh, that is an excellent question. So it's between 1 and 3. So they're like little tiny jelly bean eggs. They don't have a huge clutch. Remember last week we talked about some sharks have like 40 babies at a time. These ones, like a very respectable 1 to 3 eggs are born through platypus egg hatching. I don't know where I was going with that sentence, but I'm okay with it. It looks like we're almost out of time, but we do need to have a platypus dance, as we always do. Oh my gosh, we have a superhero with a jack-o'-lantern. So I think the platypus dance, we really, because obviously this whole episode, I was obsessed with the fact that they use their beaks for electromagnetic hunting. So I think that we need to give ourselves a platypus face, and we need to go hunting with our duckbills. We just have to have a platypus face. Yeah. And we can eat things. Nope, 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 nope. So that's our platypus dance. Everyone's so good. I love that everyone dances with me, because I would just do this by myself, and that would be fine too. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. I had such a lovely time. Next week, we are talking about an animal that I did not check to see what animal we're talking about. So it is going to be a surprise. Dana, do you know? I'm going to put you on the spot. It's going to be a surprise. It's going to be amazing. I hope everyone comes back. Tell your friends, tell your family. You know what? Before we go, I'm just going to take a little bit of time and I'm going to look it up. And oh, weird. Okay, we're going to talk about kingfishers. They're birds. They do a lot of hunting. They go in the water real quick. Their heads stabilize. It is going to be a cool thing to listen and ask questions about. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy platypuses, and you can tell all your friends about the interesting and amazing things about them. And we will see you next week for kingfishers. Bye, everybody.